Discover Help presents Stress-Free Living with Ray Samich and Mr. Stress-Free, Ratanjit S. Sandhi. This audio program is an unscripted and unrehearsed conversation between Ray and Ratanjit. It is shared with you in hope of adding value to your life. We encourage you to listen to this program in its entirety to receive the full impact of its message. Sit back, relax, open your heart, mind, and soul to this edition of Stress-Free Living.
Welcome to Stress-Free Living. Thank you so much for being with us here today. I'm Ray Samich, and I'd like to introduce you to my longtime radio colleague, co-host of this show, and my dear spiritual brother, Ratanjit Sandhi. Ratanjit, how are you today?
I'm very good, Ray. How are you?
I'm excellent, thank you. And I'm interested in talking about our discussion here today about tragedy, which befalls all of us, different levels of tragedies that happen in our lives. Some are easy to overcome, some are just devastating. Going through the death of a loved one is foremost on the list. Finding out that we have a terminal condition, some really tragic things that people go through. And I would venture to say that 99.999% of people going through a tragedy don't think in that moment, or even for a short period after, that they should be grateful for it. They are thinking about all kinds of things, but gratefulness, I don't think, is one of them. And so I wanted to talk to you about that, Ratanjit, because I know you think just opposite. You think that tragedy in some divine way is a gift. And I wanted to bring this concept up to others because maybe this might be a solution to help us get through these terribly challenging times when what the psychiatrists and psychologists, with all of their wisdom and all of their studies, haven't really been able to help us too much, or if they do, it takes a long time to get through the grieving process. And I know you think gratefulness can be a shortcut for that. So let's just start with the very basics. We know what gratefulness is. We understand thankfulness, the concept of it. But how in the world, in that terrible moment, can that be first on our list?
Looking from the worldly point of view, whenever anything bad happens, there are two ways to handle. One is that you go into depression, sadness, and all those things, and curse everybody and blame everybody, and even blame God for making that condition happen for you. So there is another way, is whatever happened, you cannot many times change that. So accept that, and going forward, figure out a way to avoid that in future. So all are, if you look from the worldly standpoint, in the business standpoint, whenever in a business we have problem, we are basically looking for what we are doing wrong and what we have to change. We change the procedure, we change the situation, and we actually make the progress. All our products which are available by the commercial companies, they all are basically addressing one issue or other. If there were not any problems which are solved into solution, we would not have any commercial business available to us. So anytime in a small company, if you are having difficulty and suddenly there is a major problem which you confront, And then because of that problem, when you can solve that, it opens a new door for your business. So shouldn't you be grateful for that? That opportunity, that because our progress lies in solving the problems. So our capacity or capability to see those problems and accept them and find the solution. And you can only find the solution with the intensity of gratefulness within you, because you are going to need your inner energy, inner sense to solve many of those problems. So if you do not accept that, acceptance with gratefulness empower you with the right chemical produced in your body, which will make you act highly creative. So in this journey of this world, where we are sent here only for a limited time, we are sent here on a mission to add value. We are sent here on a mission to convert the problem into solution. So whenever those new problems means nature has given us a new mission. So if you are spending the life and no mission is given to you, you basically would be bored.
So
Right?
I don't disagree with anything you've said. And all of the business side things are exactly right. I mean, they were all business ideas were born out of a need, and many of them were financially related, but still they found a hole in the market and they filled it. So that's all right. But those things happen with intellect. Those things happen with a person or a group of people looking at a situation intellectually and say, okay, where is the opportunity here for us to do something with this? In the moment of tragedy that we've all been through at some level, and some of us at very extreme levels, intellect is not in play. At least it's not at the forefront. We try to figure out what we have to do intellectually, what's the next move that we have to make to solve, to move forward. But most of our being is overwhelmed by the emotion. I mean, we've just gone through something devastating. Again, we've lost somebody. We've lost, maybe a storm has torn apart our house, and we don't know what we're doing. Maybe we unexpectedly lost our income source, and we've got a family, and we don't know what we're going to do. Whatever the level of tragedy is that confronts us, it's emotionally centered initially. The shock, the desperation. We're not thinking about how I can capitalize on this opportunity. We're not thinking of this as initially as a grow moment to grow and to fulfill our mission of life. I mean, admittedly, it's self-centered. Admittedly, that emotion is like, why me? And how do I overcome this? And what do I do? And how could this happen to me? I'm wondering about, in those moments, okay, what you suggest. I mean, is it really possible that we could displace all those questions that I just asked,
You
that I
know,
think most people would ask, and say, stop, just be grateful?
in uh, thousands, if not millions, of scientists and doctors have been incentivized by having one of their loved one lose their life or get attacked by a nasty disease or any circumstances. So they want to, if a young child, 10 years old or 15-year-old has lost his mother or her mother, and that incentivizes that child. I'm going to become a research scientist or a doctor to find the solution so that other people do not die. Look at our technology. We are living in a city which has Cleveland Clinic, which is amazing scientific research. Now we can even change the heart of a person, dying person. And those conditions did not happen initiated by tragedy. So many millions of people were killed, and they will be killed if those researches, those new scientific methods, knowledge does not exist.
Mm-hmm.
So that is, and all happen because of somehow a person gets incentivized, and when their focus and their incentive, their hard work, their dedication happens because of the tragedy connected to their life. Ray?
See, again, I agree. You're absolutely right. There's countless examples of that inspiration leading to great things. But this again becomes an intellectual conversation, Ratanjit. It's like we've sat back now and we've assessed what's gone on in life and how a lot of bad things have turned into, well, they're still tough things. They didn't change what happened initially, but it spurred something better, something even stronger and more meaningful for mankind. So I agree, but that's an intellectual conversation. I I wanted to start today with emotions, and maybe to make my point, I looked up what science has determined to be the 5 stages of grief. And I think we're probably all familiar. We've heard them at least in our life. And they pretty much assessed that anybody that goes through grief, most likely through some kind of a tragedy, are going to go through denial, and they're going to go through anger, then they're going to go through bargaining. And by that, I looked into it. Bargaining meaning maybe deal with God, bargaining with God. God, if you take this away from me, if you take the cancer away from me, then I will do this. Or if you never let me go through this again with anybody else that I know, then I'll do this. That kind of a bargaining deal. Then there's depression. And then finally, there's acceptance. And I don't know if the acceptance in that means I give up, because I'm just saying I can't beat it. I'm just giving up. Or if it's true acceptance, like you talk about, that says it's okay. I can move forward. I can accept and move forward. I'm not sure which acceptance is in there. But my point is that all of these really are the ways that we overcome our emotions, and we almost accept the emotions that are involved in each one of these phases. You keep taking it back to a intellectual assessment, and I don't think we can. I don't think, maybe I'm totally wrong, but I don't think our intellect is in play initially. Aren't we aren't we driven by emotion in those moments of tragedy? Isn't that what overpowers us and and causes us not to see things in a rational, intellectual way?
There are two ways to accept the final stage which you mentioned. Ultimately, you have to accept that. And acceptance, generally, how we accept is, okay, I'm helpless. You are going to do this to me, I'm going to accept. So it ends up still having some bitterness and some complaint left in you. acceptance until it is gratefully done is not truly acceptance. You know, let's one moment allow me to get away from that and look at another avenue in our life.
Okay.
You
I'm going to
know,
bring you back though, because you still haven't answered my question. So
yes,
you get a
yes.
little get a little reprieve here for a moment.
So, you know, it's ultimately all our whenever we are always looking for comfort, and comfort ultimately dulls us. You know, you're looking for initially working hard. It keeps your body fit. So in growing up, you know, we were told there are disease of the rich people and there are disease of the poor people. The rich people generally have diabetes, heart attack, cancer, those kind of, because those happen because not doing enough physical work, physical thing. They are sitting and eating. So they're supposed to have a lot of money and they're supposed to have a lot of comfort. And as a result of that, the other side is that there are people who are not well-to-do, working class. They have to work. They have to continuously do the hard labor. And because of that, they are blessed with good health. So to maintain good health, you have to subject yourself to pain. Means when you do exercise, when you do sit-ups, when you do all those things, it initially hurts your body, but eventually it gives you better health condition. So nature, how nature has designed this life is that what we call it money, happiness, that translates into our ills. So there is a beautiful saying in our prayers which says, Dukh daru sukh rog bhaya, means when you, dukh means bad things. Daru means treatment. It becomes a medicine. And sukh means happiness, good life, becomes a curse. And there's enormous wisdom in that. So other side of this is that whenever the circumstances give us a challenge, and these challenges come in all kinds of forms, many of those challenges are looked upon by us as tragedy. We lose a job, and you cannot find a job, so you end up many times starting a business, and you become very successful. But if you had the job, you will never do that. Similarly, if you are thrown out of a situation, you find another possibility if you do not give up. So life basically is vested in solving problems. We are sent here for a limited time to add value. And you can add value only if you can find the problem and define the problem and find the solution. So your question is, when something happened to us, I lost my spouse, I lost my parents, I lost my somebody, and it's a tragedy. Fundamentally, we must understand we are sent here for a temporary life. We are sent here, and our journey can be ended any moment. So you are expecting certain things, and all your ills and unhappiness stems from your expectations. And unless your expectation from you is only to make a difference, to add value, our expectation is always to receive, not to give. Expectation only work as a asset when they are part in us, expecting us to add value, expecting us to give, rather than accepting us to receive. So fundamentally, these things are basic fundamentals, and they cannot be comprehended in the typical worldly sense of looking at certain things as what we call as tragedy, because we have always defined as tragedy, and somebody else has to solve this. Whereas we are part of the solution. Until we become part of the solution, we will waste our life. All our real happiness comes from solving a problem. Real happiness doesn't come from luxury and all those things. Those are happiness experienced by our five senses. The real soul only experiences happiness when it adds value. Right?
Ratanjit, as always, there's so many sentences that you've said, so many thoughts that you've communicated, that each one of them is a golden jewel. Collectively, it's life-changing. At the same time, I've been on a track here today to try to understand this particular aspect of going through a tragic moment. And I'm not going to back down on this one. When we come back from the break, I still want to come back and understand how we can overcome the emotions of the moment. And maybe that's a process of being prepared for it. Just like when you say you work out in the gym, maybe we have to change our life before the tragedy happens so we can endure it. But if we haven't, how do we get through that moment of time? You mentioned a couple of the topics there that I just want to let all of our audience, our listeners and viewers know, is that we do have a YouTube channel, Stress Free Living Radio. We have done shows on fear of death, and I think they're very powerful, have helped many people, including me, actually, to better understand and not fear the death that awaits all of us at some point. And we've also done shows on expectations and how those do mislead us so often in our life, or take us down a path that when those don't meet up to our expectations, when life doesn't happen the way we want, how that can certainly harm us and set us back. And so how we can be watchful of the expectations that we have. So those shows are out there, over 100 different shows that we invite you to look through at your leisure and maybe share with others that may be in need of those types of topics. When we come back today, though, on this edition, we're going to revisit tragedy. And in a moment when tragedy happens, how can we possibly be grateful in that moment? This is Stress Free Living. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, everybody, we have 90 seconds. If anybody would like to weigh in on this. Am I off base, by the way, to harp on this, or should we just move on? Tell me what you think.
So I think your point of putting denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance is very legitimate. I mean, that's what we read as physicians. So the purpose are at that point, if you will, Ratanjit, is to shorten that duration of each. This is what we want to achieve. So we need to figure out a way to shorten those. And the only thing that I can, or at least thought about it, is to accept it sooner if it's possible. And there are two phases he pointed out. One, you do it, accept it grudgingly. The other one is with gratefulness. The third one, which is, like you said, is not intellectual, that is by doing things that you truly enjoy. For example, if you enjoy your job, put more time in your job. If you enjoy running, hobbies, do more running. People often do that. Anything that they do, they enjoy it, put more time in there. I used to think at that time, like he's pointing out, the entrepreneurship and doing better to solve the situation, find a purpose in life. So if your purpose during the stressful is, for example, he pointed out, to find the cure for cancer, that becomes a lot easier because your mind is diverted at something other than the tragedy. So that doesn't require a lot of intellectual part, right? You just put something that you can find a purpose and put all your efforts in achieving that. That's my 2 cents worth, I think.
We're back on Stress Free Living. Thank you so much for being with us. In between our segments, we have a wonderful opportunity of interacting with our guests that are joining us on the Zoom call. They join us from across the United States, Canada, other countries around the world. It is just so invigorating and enjoyable to have so many wonderful people that join us every week on our Zoom call. If you'd like to be a part of that, when you go out to that Stress Free Living radio channel on YouTube, you'll see the link. And you'll find the Zoom link that you can join us live as we are together every Saturday. And let us know you're doing that. Communicate with us, and we'll make sure that we are ready for you and acknowledge you when you join the call. Ratanjit, let's go back to, and this was suggested by one of our Zoom guests, fabulous guests, because we don't get just regular people on this. We get the smartest, most loving, brilliant, kindest people as joining us. So it's wonderful to interact with these genius, loving, caring people all the time. They referred again to those 5 steps, okay, that I talked about. You know, the grieving and the denial and the depression and all of those things. They suggested that if we try to do that acceptance, which is supposedly the last on the list, if we try to do that acceptance earlier, then maybe that would shortcut everything. And maybe that would answer my question too. Because if we can go in this thing without the thought of being grateful initially, because grateful is not in our vocabulary, I just don't see it in our brain when we've just, and I'll just make up an example. We just had a car crash and we lost members of our immediate family in the car crash. And there's no way in the world in that moment I can say I'm grateful. Okay, I'm just devastated by something incredibly tragic as that. And so, but can I start acceptance? Maybe, and not the acceptance that says, I can't change it, so just give up and be miserable. But the acceptance that said there must be a reason that I just don't know. Could that be part of the solution here, is to engage that acceptance at a much earlier level?
There are 2 aspects of this. One is that we do not live our knowledge, we live our habits. And early on in life, we must develop a habit of acceptance. Acceptance, as we talked in earlier shows, puts her into the present moment. Otherwise, we remain part in past, why this happened, and blame and those things. or we are lost in our dreams of the future, but we are never present. It is only in the present moment what we do decides our future. So acceptance is a paradigm which always, you don't have to wait for tragedy. You have to form a habit of acceptance. And acceptance doesn't mean that whatever is given to whatever condition you are placed under, you accept and live that. Acceptance means understand that you are put into this position. And instead of complaining, it is similar to when you go to a doctor and you have all kinds of condition, heart condition or whatever it is. So basically, he accepts or she accepts your condition rather than telling you, you did this and you did this and why you did this and why you are coming to me now. Right? So
Yeah.
by acceptance, the condition of the patient, doctor can treat the patient. And then, of course, in the future, they can suggest to change their life so that this does not happen again. That is the one aspect of acceptance. We have to develop a habit of acceptance. Suddenly, when the tragedy happens, you cannot suddenly accept this until you have this habit. So, second thing is that every tragedy happens with a purpose. It basically, you are spending your life, you have a job or you're a student or something, suddenly a tragedy happens. So suddenly you understand this tragedy is given to you to give you a purpose in life to find a solution for this tragedy not to happen again. And that tragedy is so impactful that you're going to be dedicated for the purpose. And intensity and dedication to the purpose happens because of the tragedy. And one of the way our esteemed listener, Dr. Mehta, mentioned that you have to, it is easier to accept when you have a purpose. The purpose of life is to add value, and this gives you a purpose to avoid this, to find a way this tragedy does not happen again. So that is, there are two aspects of this thing to handle this, Ray.
So let's talk about both of those, because I think we're right on the track here, right track here. I guess respectfully, you've never answered the question of how to overcome the emotion in the moment, because I don't think without developing the habits that you're talking about, I think it would be almost impossible to overcome the emotion in the moment without having done that work beforehand of developing that habit.
Yes.
You know, you gave the analogy of the gym again, and I mean, if you were in the ocean and suddenly, you know, the cruise ship went down and you're in the middle of the ocean swimming, if you hadn't been physically fit, there's no way in the world you would survive that in the middle of the ocean. I mean,
Or you
even if
did
you
not
were
learn,
physically fit,
or you did not
with
learn swimming. You have to.
yeah, yeah, if you didn't know how to swim, yeah, and that's me. I don't know how to swim. But if I didn't know how to swim and I'm in the ocean, hello heaven, I hope. Um, but so the point is that you have to be prepared. And I think the way to prepare ourselves, and hopefully we'll never go through those tragedies at a severe level, but we'll all have some, is by developing a couple of habits. And I think this is right on the right track. So I want to talk about both of those habits. I want to talk about the habit of true acceptance, and also the habit of understanding our purpose, because I think both of those are just so critical in this process. So the habit of acceptance, and we've done shows on acceptance, 60-minute shows that people can catch on Stress Free Living, the radio channel on YouTube. But in a nutshell, I just want to again point out the difference, because I don't think we all truly understand what acceptance is. I think most of us kind of use it as a synonym for giving up. We can't change it. We've tried to figure out how to change it and we can't. So we just have to accept it and move on. But that's not the acceptance you're talking about. So I know maybe we're being a little repetitive, but can you explain again how your definition and practical application of acceptance is different than what I just said?
It's like when you play cards, there's a professional player and there is a new player. The newbie, a new person, is always going to complain about the cards they have read. Oh my goodness, I'm dealt with. But the professional never complains about the cards. He plays the games with the card they are dealt with. That is the true acceptance. So whatever condition you are put under, it's like firefighters. When they go, they assess the condition. They formulate a plan, right?
Yeah.
Because they do not go back, why this happened, why that. That is later on they can evaluate. But at that moment, to tackle the problem, they have to accept whatever that is. That is complaint-free, ego-free acceptance. And if you add the ingredient of gratefulness, suddenly your thinking, your mindset would have internal help from your body, because in the grateful moment, you have chemicals produced in your body, hormones produced in your body, which give you better energy, more thinking power, more creativity. So that is what gratefulness does to you. Gratefulness is fundamentally required for going forward to achieve your mission, the purpose, to add value, by first accepting the condition under which you are. Ray?
Appreciate everything you said. Love everything you said. I think the acceptance also that we're talking about doesn't focus on us again, because I think that's our human nature. I believe that if we still have this underlying thought of why me, I'm a good person, I do things right, I treat people well, I've accumulated all of these wonderful things that I've done, why me, why is this happening to me? I think if with that focus, it's just so hard to accept, because we're focused on us. If the acceptance I think that you're talking about says, you know, forget all of that, forget you for a moment, this is bigger than me, this is bigger, acceptance of the world, acceptance of the divine, acceptance of the situation says it's not all about me. And I don't know how easy it is to do in that moment, but don't you think that that's essential, that I stop thinking about me in the moment to try to be truly accepting?
You know, when we have our armed forces, an army officer handles the war. When you take a normal person in life and send him to war front, they will be devastated. So you have to train a normal person to be a soldier.
Right.
So we are never trained to confront life. And that training requires the fundamental truth. Who are we? How are we designed? If you are given a equipment, and you don't know how it works, how it is designed, you will never be fully utilize it. And thirdly, what are we sent here for? What is our true purpose? So these three answers must be given at the very early stage of our life, because that will embed your mind in the right direction. Your core character is formed before the age of 6. And we need to tell these kids, who are they? They are not the human body. They are the power within the human body. They are sent here for a purpose. What is the purpose? And we have to tell them they are unique masterpieces. So they learn to respect others because they see others as unique. So these three basic truths must be inculcated in a human being who is in the earliest journey of their life. So we do not prepare our soldier and we put them in the war. Right?
It's a great analogy. It's just a wonderful analogy, and we are not prepared for life. There's no question about it. Hopefully, this show might help a little bit in that regard. So that's the habit of acceptance. You just kind of touched on the other habit that was discussed earlier, and that's the habit of knowing our purpose. You just mentioned that in the three things that we need to teach our kids and need to teach us at any age. To have that habit already before the tragedy happens, to always understand, maybe this even matches what I just said about the focus not being on me. Maybe that ties into that too, is that our purpose of life is not for me to have anything or to do anything, except to add value at the highest level to the bigger one. So that knowledge is actually a part, I think, of acceptance and a part of purpose, is that the mission is far greater than me and far greater than any one tragedy, as severe as it may be, could be. It's not going to stop me from my purpose of life. And maybe there's an element of faith in there that says this even happened for a reason, to allow me to fulfill my purpose at a higher level. What do you think?
Absolutely. There is another aspect of life. So when you are working in a company, amazing technology, amazing things are available for you to use. You cannot take them home. They don't become yours. So similarly, you are on this purpose, sent here on this earth, and you'll be given all kinds of things and you call them yours. You end up in the possession mode. Whereas the reality is that in this human form, in this life, it is impossible to own anything because we don't even own our own body. And there's another aspect of life. What is poison? You heard of Rumi, the poet Rumi, and he says, anything that is more than what is necessary is poison. It may be power, wealth, hunger, ego, greed, laziness, love, ambition, hate, technology, science. How could science be a poison? Because look at this AI. Eventually, if it's let it go all the way, it'll make human beings irrelevant.
Yeah.
So everything must be confined to its place. They are only given to us to add value, not to accumulate. And when we are in the ego mode, not knowing who we are, we end up accumulating because I want to be better than others. Whether it is I'm accumulating wealth or technology or whatever it is. So look at the race going on in the whole world. It's end up making every human being in the working in the wrong direction, right?
We need to take a break. We're going to come back and try to wrap all of this up. We're also going to interact during the short break with a couple more of our wonderful Zoom guests, and we'll be back on this edition of Stress Free Living. Please stay with us. All right, folks, go right ahead. And if you have a question that you want me to ask or a thought, this is your chance. Is this making sense?
Well, here's Doug, and I'm always amazed at how Ratanjit can come up with his thoughts and ideas on these things. It just, well, he kind of boggles my mind with his ability to do that. But I was just going to mention my wife, Patricia. She's been through a lot of physical things, cancer and other things, and she just has the most positive attitude about everything. She never lets it get down. I don't know exactly. It's kind of her faith, I guess, but it's kind of striking home with me now that you guys are talking about dealing with strategy. She has the ability to do it. I'm not too sure exactly what that is, but she can certainly do it. Never gets her down.
Great inspiration. Thank you. Anybody else? You have a couple seconds. Okay, Brian, we are as humans from our core based on hope. Hope drives us to find the solutions for the value. Maybe we'll talk about hope a little bit, Ratanjit, although you had an expression about hope that we shared a few shows back that wasn't the most supportive of that word. If you remember your quote, think about that a second.
Yes.
Brian is not, he's under the weather today, so he's communicating by way of the chat, which we appreciate. Okay, I think we just have like 15 seconds left if I can use my radio clock. All right, Ratanjit, I think we're on our own. Stick around, everybody. Afterwards, we'd love to hear from you without any restrictions of broadcast time. We are back on Stress Free Living. Ratanjit Sandhi and yours truly, Ray Samich, joining you today, talking about tragedy, accepting tragedy, and in some crazy way, can we be thankful? Can we be grateful when tragedy happens? And we admit that it's hard in the moment, and maybe long term we understand it, but in the short term moment, it's so devastating, challenging to us. So we've talked about developing habits. We've talked about developing a habit of acceptance with gratefulness to really realize that there is a greater world and a greater purpose for us to have. And then that habit of purpose that says, this is not going to stop us from what our mission of life is, to add the highest value in the short time that we're here. Ratanjit, a new thought just came in on this last break from one of our guests, and they introduced the idea of hope, as hope being necessary for us to overcome tragedy. We've done some shows on hope. What's your take on that?
Basically, when hope is embedded in the purpose, then hope has a meaning. If hope is embedded in our desires or ego or fear or greed, it has no meaning. So unless we, if we are hopeful that this problem would be solved and do nothing about it, it's not joined with the purpose, is useless. When you find a solution for cancer, or when you're finding a solution for some problem, and that hope of finding a solution gets converted into your mission of life, you're not going to give up. And that not giving up is energized by your hope. So until you tie up your hope with the purpose, that hope is only a wishful thinking.
We talked about the different kinds of acceptance. One, just giving up, which still has a lot of negative vibes to it, and you never really get over it then. You never really do accept it if you've just given up. But if you have acceptance with gratefulness, you truly can move on. I think hope also has a dual understanding. And a lot of us always say, well, I always hope. I always hope for more. I always hope for the best. But it is kind of hollow, isn't it? It is kind of empty. It's a word. It's like a placeholder. I can't think of any other way to do it. So I'm just going to have hope.
Yeah.
Without that mission, without that intent, and the word that I was thinking of, and I don't remember the entire quote, but you actually said hope is for losers, okay, in one of our shows. And it is for losers if we just use it as a placeholder. If we just fall back on it and say, I hope it's going to get better, it's like you're whistling in the dark. You know, there's no hope of a change, of success, if that's the way you take it. So I love so much how you've just said this other way of doing it. Hope with purpose. Hope
Yes.
that it goes to the intent that your unique masterpiece of a existence can take you there. You look like you're ready to say one more thing. We have a couple minutes left. Do
Hope.
you have a summary maybe of today's show?
Pardon?
Do you have a summary maybe from some final thoughts that you want to share before we have to say goodbye?
Fundamentally, we have talked about the gratefulness, acceptance, and all that, and tragedy. And fundamentally, the most important part we learn from this today's talk is that we have to prepare the human being for life. So we have to inculcate certain habits in them, and that has to be done very early. So eventually what happens is a child is understanding of the child is not from the words. They copy the habits of their people around them, their parents. So to teach children, it is essential to have parents develop those habits themselves, to live in the present, to understand their mission, to comprehend who they are and how they are designed. So they inculcate those things in every talk and every effort and every action. As a consequence, the children will receive that because they receive only from their mirror neurons, which is reflective of your habits, which are embedded in their thinking. So that's why people say the apple doesn't fall away from a tree. Basically, it is all because of our habits which we have cultivated, passed on to our children.
We'll leave that as the final thought here today. Except I have to add one more because we have 30 seconds. You know, nobody wants to go through tragedy. I think the only thing worse than that is that we don't want our children to go through a tragedy. We don't want them to feel the pain that we have felt through tragedies. So that just supports what you just said. If we can pass along this knowledge and know this for ourselves, but more importantly, prepare our children with these habits and prevent them from having to go through the most devastating times that some of us have incurred, have faced in our lives. What a great gift we are giving to our children with that. Ratanjit, thank you for sharing all of this with all of us, and thank you for being there on the other sides of your radios, computers, however you're watching or listening. We value you and hope that we have added value to your life. Remember, we're all playing the same game. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you again real soon. All right. With that, everybody, it is your turn. Love to hear back from you on today's show and your thoughts.
Nobody's talking. Rekha, you have any comments, or generally?
No, I think you nailed it. I think I mean, I can't speak from experience yet because I haven't really been myself through any major tragedies, but I do hope that, when they come, we've trained our mind to recognize that, hey, this is, happening for a reason, and there's something good that's going to come from that. And, I always think of, like, let's say we're thinking about death or something. I personally find it really important to talk about these things with our children as well, right? Because I find sometimes we hide away from tragedy, or we kind of shove it under the rug. And then I think that's also what then causes fear around the tragedy. So I feel like the more open conversations we have about it, and it's like, yeah, like life's going to have up and downs, and, it's about looking at the silver. Everything happens for a reason. There's always a silver lining. Hopefully we're equipping them as well, that when they do go through a tragedy, they're able to, look at it in a positive light and know that something good will come out of it. But again, I can't speak from experience. I haven't been through any major tragedy. So I also recognize that it's very different when you're going through it yourself. But no, I think it was really nice conversation. And yeah, I agree that line.
Well, maybe by catching the show before, thankfully you've had that tragedy, maybe this will help you get through it a little bit better.
Yeah.
Good. Anybody else have a thought? Sale? Dr. Ken, anything else?
Everything was fine. Everything good. I fully agree with Ratanjit sir. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, it's
Thank
a
you, Jackie.
challenging topic, actually. It's not truly an easy one, but I think what he's pointing out is try to learn from every tragedy you face. First time, it's going to be very hard, very, very hard. But the more you think about positive things in that moment, the better it is going to be. Often if people die after a prolonged illness, we always talk about that at least he's not suffering anymore, or if there is a sudden, at least he did not or she did not suffer in the end, and it was a peaceful death. So finding something, even a ray of hope or something that is a positive, it's requires training. You just can't think of it. And just like she's saying, talking to other people helps, because if there is some other person who says something positive to help you get through it, it's very helpful. That's why group therapy helps all the time. Talking to different people with different experiences is very helpful.
What you said was that when somebody suffers a long time and when they pass away, we feel that at least he's free of suffering.
Right.
So when somebody passes away in an accident or something quickly,
at least he didn't suffer. People talk about it.
So we wish our loved one to suffer.
I know, but that's not what at that time think
But
about it. Like Ray's pointing
that's
out, you still go through grief. It's very hard to immediately come to a positive aspect of everything in life.
we are never
And it
thinking
depends
about
on the experience too.
we are never thinking about the others who are suffering. We are
Yeah.
thinking about our own emotions.
That's true. It's not an easy topic to deal with it. First time I remember first time I had a patient that I had to lose. It was a tiny baby. It was very hard on me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
Sahil, you had something you wanted to say?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Right. Firstly, thank you so much for the session, and apologies. I've been slightly distracted by the final today, but I could the main points that I could gather from the session were I really liked the points that you made on acceptance, and the quote in Punjabi that you'd mentioned at the start made me think of a concept that someone had mentioned to me of chardi kala, and I think you'd be able to explain that a lot better. But it's basically having strength and finding resilience in the face of tragedy. So I think those 2 points I really like from the session, and those are things I'd take away from this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. So good luck if you're having a final, if that's what you had shared with us. Good luck with that.
Right. Yeah, I'll just tune into that. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Yes, we've heard from everyone. Unless you have another thought, we welcome that.
It's a serious topic, Ray.
Yes, it is.
Very
Yes, it
serious.
is. And I tried to pin Ratanjit down in some areas, but
But
I think unless you are prepared in advance, I think unless
Yeah.
these habits, I liked how that ended up. Without going in details, I've lost infants and I've lost loved ones at all different ages, and each one of those has been a tragedy. And I think each one has helped me to cope with the next. But if I would have been founded in these 2 habits, I think it would have helped me from the very beginning. So
I think
I
that
can.
these situations, sometimes leaving a person who's going through grieving process, living alone and let them think it through it also helps. That's something that I teach my medical students, that if looks like somebody's grieving, just shut up and don't say any word. Let them, they will say something if they need your help, but leaving them alone helps. Because once they go through the process of denial and anger and everything, then they'll just say, Doc, help me. I can't get it over with it, that I didn't deserve it. And then you can help it out at that time.
But if we
all
could
have our
shortcut
ways
that,
of dealing with the tragedy.
I think the point we were trying to make though is if we can shortcut that process,
Yes, that's always
if we could,
helpful.
it's interesting how, the 5th step is acceptance. I was sharing with Ratanjit before we all went on the air. It's like, okay, if I understand that this is the process, then I almost should find joy in reaching the 4th step, because I know I'm almost through. And the 4th step is depression. So it's ironic to me how I could say, okay, I'm grateful that I'm now at the step of depression.
Yeah.
Okay. You know what I'm saying? So I'd like to circumvent that whole thing. I'd like to be able to put acceptance up front so that I could cope with those other steps more easily. I don't know if that
But
clinically makes sense,
but
but it
that's what
seems like,
Ratanjit was pointing out, that with the practice or teaching your loved ones from the beginning and expecting them and changing your habits will help. It certainly won't happen overnight, suddenly. If you're first time facing it, like you were saying, people go through this no matter what.
Rika, I want to ask Rika a question here, because I know you guys do a lot of work around the world with children, and we are referring many times to teaching children. Do you think, from your experience already and your teaching and everything you're doing, is this something that can be understood by kids? Is this something that kids, I think, would be open to really not just listening, but truly understanding what this is?
100%. I mean, I honestly think children are the ones that teach us. You know, if we can like step away and in their essence, at least a lot of kids that I've met or my own kids, like they teach us, they can teach us these lessons if we give them the opportunity to like be their true selves. Like, I mean, I think this is definitely a concept that kids could understand. And like Uncle said, I think we have to also model it ourselves, right? So, and it doesn't come, it's not going to come out in the moment when the tragedy happens for the first time. I think it really happens in like the moment to moment experiences we're having. So like, how do we react when there's a little tragedy or something's not going the way we expect it, right? I think tragedy is like the bigger test, but there's tests on a daily basis when it's just like, oh, things are not going the way I expected them to go. How do I react in that moment, right? So a tragedy is something's not happening the way you expected it to happen. You expected this person to be in your life forever, or, you know, have a long life. But I think we have moments every day to show children how we respond when things are not going the way we expect them to go. And I think those little moments are really what sets you up for how you deal with a major tragedy. At least I hope that it is setting you up. And I think it's a muscle that needs to be trained as well, right? And it's not easy to find the good when everything's going terribly bad. But I think if we stop and take a moment, whether it's with ourselves or with children, to say, okay, everything's going horribly right now, not the way we expected, but what good can we see out of this? Like, you know, I'm sure maybe, you know, if it wasn't raining today, or I don't know, you know, you could always kind of like say, well, we don't know what could have happened, but it could have been 10 times worse. So we think that what's happening is not great, but it could actually be 10 times worse. And we can just be grateful for, you know, the situation that we're in right now. I think it's almost a muscle that needs to be trained. But I already see it in our next generation. I think it's super exciting personally. I think the mindset of a lot of children in this like next generation is like they would get this stuff easily, I think.
Yeah, Rekha, you are absolutely right. I've seen it time and time again. Children learn from their parents how they act. I'm sure Ratanjit will vouch for that. You don't have to point to them that this is how you should do it. They will watch you, how you react to tragedy, and they learn from them. At that time, it's very crucial for parents to behave they expect their children to behave in their time of tragedy. And this is the lesson from the very beginning. I learned it, that children watch their parents. You don't have to point to them each and everything. Do you agree, Rekha? That's what you were pointing out, and that's exactly the truth I've seen. I'm a pediatrician, so I know how the kids do.
Yeah. They learn from, I think they learn like from the people around them, their energy, right? So even if you could say things, oh, you have to be positive, you have to do this, unless they feel that in you yourself, then it's just talk, right? So I think they really pick up from how we bring ourselves.
Absolutely.
Like, so my first company, I was actually building mindfulness curriculums for kids before this company. And I quickly realized that it's actually not about teaching the kids. We have to actually embody it as adults ourselves. Like the teachers have to not just understand it, they have to embody it. And until they embody it, you know, the kids, they're not going to listen to anything you say, right? So I think that's really, really important.
You know, there's another fundamental question. What is a true tragedy? And what we call tragedy is not tragedy. The true tragedy is not knowing what our purpose of life is. That is, results in wasting our life in indulgent collecting time-dated garbage. possessions, ego, and all that. So we waste our precious life. That is tragedy. Looking for ownership pattern, what we call tragedy. When we lose something, that is tragedy. Nothing belongs to us to begin with. How can we lose?
It's really true. Reka, you just said, it could be 10 times worse. You said when we're kind of assessing things. Wouldn't living a whole lifetime, 50 years, 90 years, whatever it is, living a whole lifetime without fulfilling the purpose of your life, that would be a million times worse than anything that could have happened during your life. It really is true. And most of us don't even know what our purpose is, let alone trying to fulfill it. So you're at, I wish we would have brought that up during the show. Because on a perspective basis, on a relative basis, that would be the truest tragedy of life.
Yeah, I'll share just a quick story actually of myself. Like, I studied accounting, I did my CA, I was like recruited very young to work at KPMG, and I knew I wasn't like serving my purpose. Like, I just knew it inside that I wasn't where I was meant to be, even though that's where I was very quickly, very fast, but I couldn't figure it out. Like, what am I meant to do? Where am I supposed to be? And I don't think I actually dedicated much time to it either. Like, I knew I wasn't happy, but you just can't continue on living life. And then when I got pregnant with our son, our first child, I ended up actually being put on very strict bed rest. Okay. So for 5 months, I had to lay in the hospital with my legs like higher than my torso, and I wasn't allowed to move at all. So I couldn't even sit up to eat. I couldn't go to the bathroom. I had to just stay in this one position. And, like, I had, for the first day, you're scared, you don't know if the baby's going to survive. You don't know what's going on. I was completely healthy. And then, after about 24 hours, I was like, okay, like, I still have this like baby inside me. So I got to just make the most of the situation and like be positive and like, make the most out of it, and kind of really changed my mindset to just say, okay, we're going to roll with this. And it was difficult, but it was during that time of like 5 months of bed rest where, I'm not running around, not cooking or doing groceries or living life. And I just laid in bed, and I had this like laptop stand. You both know Rick and Amit, they got me this like laptop stand. And I was there with a laptop for like just being quiet and silence for like 5 months. And it was during that time of bed rest where like everyone was like, oh, poor you, this is the biggest tragedy. We don't know if baby's going to survive. But it was during those 5 months of bed rest that I finally slowed down enough to like connect to like what my inner voice is telling me I actually need to be doing in life. And it was when I was on bed rest that I developed my first company, which led to my second company and like led to what I'm doing now. But had I not gone through that tragedy of being on bed rest and like really, laying there not knowing if the baby would survive or not, I don't think I would have, I know I wouldn't be where I am today, and it took that tragedy or that really difficult moment in my life to get me to where I am today, for me to align with my purpose. So like, I think and for me personally, and I used to share this when I did like mindfulness training with teachers back in the day, is that in that moment, like, going back to that moment every time I'm going through something difficult now, and knowing that, okay, I went through something really difficult in the past, but because I went through that, I was able to align and get back to where I'm meant to be. That if I'm going through a difficult situation right now, it has to be happening for a purpose, for a reason, to realign me or get me back on track of what I'm meant to be doing. And I think that's what I was talking about, like training the muscle, like, because it's really hard when you're in a really difficult situation. It's much easier to go down the rabbit hole of this is horrible. It's not what it's meant to be. I hate this, like it's so easy to go down that track. But if you could you have to like almost consciously pull yourself out of that thought frame and like find a reason to be grateful for, or know that, okay, this is not going the way it's supposed to, but I know it's going to end up however it's meant to end up. I think that like training our mind to get out of there and just really focus on the positive, or and not even the positive, the unknown, right? Because sometimes there's nothing positive in the situation, but the silver lining will come years down the line. That's what makes it tricky, is when you don't know, right? But I think if we can remind ourselves of difficult times we've been through, and there ended up being a silver lining, or everything worked out the way it was meant to be, I think that also helps us like kind of not go down the negative rabbit holes.
Rekha, you are also a perfect example of unconditional love of a mom for the baby, which Ratanjit pointed out all the time, that mother can have an unconditional love. You suffered for what, 3 or 4 months? That's what moms do, and most people don't realize how much devotion and love a mom can have for the baby. Think about it.
Yeah, but honestly, what the biggest lesson I got out of that, which it wasn't even me, it was like what I learned through that whole experience was that there's an even higher unconditional love, right? Like we're all part of this like divine masterpiece. And like what I realized, like I had no control whether the baby was going to survive or not. I just had to lay there. Like,
But think about it. I mean, how much devotion and love you had for the baby that you were willing to do anything for them. Think about it. And that's a perfect example of unconditional love. You didn't even know what the outcome was going to be, but you still devoted your whole body and time and effort just for the baby. I just love some of the things he points all the time. Ratanjit is just brilliant guy, no question about it.
Beautiful
Thank you,
point,
Ray.
Beautiful stories. Thank you for sharing, Rika, with that. It was very supporting of everything else that Ratanjit has been talking about. Thank you. And you are a great mom.
Thank you.
And how old is that little guy?
Mahan Singh is now 12 years old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Does he know this story?
He does, yeah.
Yeah.
He does.
You should give me an extra hug for that.
He's very loving. Yeah, he's great. I forget myself, honestly, but I find
that's what moms do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when he's 16 and does that first thing that really ticks you off, remember that story.
I will. I'll remind him the story.
Yeah, right. That's even more important. All right, everybody. Ratanjit, you didn't comment on that. Anything you want to say before we close out?
This is a complete example of what we have been talking.
Yeah.
Rika, your story summarized our whole program.